Hello and welcome to the third session today of the first week of Devtoberfest 2024. We are a little bit late because we had a tiny problem with going live. I'm so sorry, but it should now be working. So as I said, this is the third session of the first Mad Thursday. So today everything is about machine learning, AI, and data. And with a little delay, we can now finally start. Let me first remind you quickly that you should definitely go to the SAP community website and join the Devtoberfest group. Because if you join the Devtoberfest group, you can also join the contest. And you want to join the contest because then you can actually win the big prize. And this year, the big prize, for example, was a trip to Florida to the ASAC Tech Connect event. So make sure you watch out for the validation tutorials of the sessions. I'm going to be posting the validation tutorial of today's session a little bit later today. You will find it in the description. And when you take the question in the validation tutorial, you're going to earn points towards the big prize. And with that, I want to introduce our speaker today, which is Thomas Schneider. He's the product owner of Generative AI Hub at SAP. And he's going to tell us about the orchestration functionality of Generative AI Hub today. And I'm super excited to have him because whenever I work with Generative AI Hub, I see the scenario orchestration, and I've never tried it out because I just don't have the time. So I'm very excited today, and I'm going to be probably the most active listener here. And yeah, Thomas, just go ahead.
Thank you, Nova, for the introduction. So I prepared some slides for today. Let me share my screen quickly, and we can get right started. Okay, you should be able to see my screen, right?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, so first of all, I want to give a quick introduction to, in general, what we mean with Generative AI Hub. So we are all on the same page here. Maybe you have seen this slide. If not, you will see this slide a couple of times also during TechEd. It explains our setup in the Gen AI Hub. And it all starts here with the AI ecosystem here at the bottom, where we have the different partnerships and investments. And this is essentially allowing you to consume easily all the different LLM providers, starting from Aleph Alpha, which is a self-hosted option at SAP, up to AWS, Korea, but also Google with the Gemini models, and of course, the Meta Llama models, as well as Microsoft Azure OpenAI, of course. The nice thing here is that you don't have to deal with different licenses and contracts. You just have your SAP contract. You just subscribe to AI Core on BTP, and you have immediately access to all these different models. And we also build on top of that some convenience features. I will show you this later today. And then also covering a bit the other aspects we see here, we use then this ecosystem to build our AI foundation internally, which is the same thing that is also externally exposed. So you are certain that everything is up to standards and is fulfilling enterprise requirements and qualities. And on top of that, we of course have then internally our embedded AI capabilities that you can use across the SAP portfolio. So for example, use cases are like in SAP SuccessFactors, where you have the job description generation or review process of things you type in different SAP products that you can then improve. And then further on top, we have Joule, which integrates across this portfolio, across these products. So Joule is our co-pilot that you can just ask different questions, and it pulls information behind the scenes to help you with your request. But today I want to focus on the AI foundation part. So what do we mean by that? So it consists of 3 different layers. At the bottom, we have the business data and context, which is really important, of course, in AI applications nowadays, especially in generative AI applications. If you look at retrieval augmented generation, right, which is a very common pattern. And we have also grounding capabilities that are soon, very soon, right after TechEd, to be released. So stay tuned. And on top of that, we have the AI lifecycle management aspect. So this essentially is in its core AI core, which allows you to manage the lifecycle of different AI resources. For example, prompt templates. We have the execution engine and also deployments for a serverless experience when it comes to deploying your services. And then on top, we have using these capabilities, we have AI services. So for example, document extraction would be one case. So if we focus today here on the AI lifecycle management, we will also see here immediately orchestration already next to deployment and delivery, exploration, development, and access. So access is essentially what I mentioned before, which allows you to access the different LLMs across the board of providers we interact with. And then exploration features and development features. So for example, if you work a bit with AI Core Gen AI Hub, you will also see that we have quite a nice UI solution, AI Launchpad, which allows you to explore, for example, the iteration process of how to come to the best prompt template for your use case. So we have capabilities for that as well. And then what I also mentioned before already with AI Core deployment and delivery, where you can, for instance, deploy services in a serverless manner and also, deploy your models, run execution jobs. And similar to that, we have now orchestration capabilities, which is in itself a new service we are adding to AI Core, or has been added, and we are adding features to that. And this is today's focus. So what exactly do I mean by that? So this is the launch, a quick glimpse of how it looks like in Launchpad, where you can configure this orchestration workflow. But I want to focus today more on first this aspect, on what is the orchestration service consisting of, what do we mean by an orchestration workflow, and then later I still want to have some time to show you a code example, how you can build a simple chatbot to get started with, to know how to use these different aspects of the orchestration service. So if you ask me personally, I would rather say orchestration. If we look at the orchestration service itself, it's more of an inference sequence. It's not like an asynchronous execution job or so, where you have, like a graph which you can execute, or like a job or data pipelining job. It's not the case here. Consider this more of an inference service where you send requests to. That's a REST API. You send requests to, and each request you can configure in such a way that can completely change everything. Because the orchestration service is built in such a way that it's stateless. Later in the future, we are also adding features which allow you to introduce state. But how it is designed from the ground up is that you can, and this simplifies a lot the development aspect of building your Gen AI application with orchestration, because you can quickly iterate, and we will also see this in the code demo, without having to change state essentially in AI Core. So we see here the request comes in, and we have this sequence. Essentially, this is of course a bit simplified, but it covers the modules you can configure with each request. So grounding, prompt templating, and then two modules which handle the safety aspect of orchestration, data masking for data privacy and content filtering, for making the responses, for example, safe to portray in a business application, as well as the large language model access, where you can configure the model you want to use from these different choices across the board. And then really important here, a little feature in my opinion, is the harmonized API across all models. So this means that, for instance, if you first start developing your application with GPT-4, which has the Azure OpenAI specification, the API spec, and you later realize, okay, it would make sense to switch, for instance, to Gemini, let's say because of the larger context size, which you would like to use there, you are then, you have to deal with the challenge that the API contract changes because, right, the Gemini, the Google Vertex AI API is differently structured than Azure OpenAI. You don't have this problem if you use the orchestration service, because with orchestration, we harmonize all these different models inside our model access. So you just have one API contract you develop against, and nothing changes if you want to switch, let's say, GPT-4 with Gemini. So a quick deep dive or one trip to through the different modules you can configure. So grounding, really exciting. This is going, like I said, it's going to be released right after TechEd. So this is the next module we are going to release for orchestration. And it allows you to connect to the grounding capabilities that are also the underlying building blocks of Joule. So we are really certain that we are using here the best technology we have in the house. And this is really facilitating then the process for you. For instance, if you have a bunch of PDF files, the idea here is that you can just place them in a SharePoint, for instance, and then connect the orchestration service using our grounding capabilities to retrieve relevant context at the request time, at the runtime. Right. So this is then simplifying for you the process to connect actually such an LLM service with the data plane. So you can focus on more important aspects of your GenAI application. And if we continue with the next module, the prompt templating module. So what this is it allows you to send the prompt templates that you perhaps have already designed in your application or next to your source code, right? You can use them with the orchestration service on the fly. And also then later this year, we are as well releasing the prompt registry service, which is a central service, again, part of GenAI Hub AI Core, which you can use to centrally manage in an efficient manner all your prompt templates across your applications. You have an easy lifecycle management for that. So stay tuned for that one. And we will, of course, offer then right away integration capabilities between these two services so that you can essentially dynamically also retrieve the right prompt template for the request you're currently handling in your application. So this will be possible for that. And that's essentially also the main reason why we have this prompt templating module already now here in place in orchestration. Now, of course, it's also important to make your GenAI application secure and responsible. For that, we have two modules, the data masking module, which allows you to anonymize and pseudonymize data before you send it to any different provider. So for example, for an LLM request, but also if we consider other aspects of orchestration, or let's say if you have a more complicated setup where you communicate for certain steps in the pipeline with different service providers outside SAP now, right? You may have the requirement that no personal data is allowed to reach these external providers. And you can do this easily with our data masking module, right? And also with content filtering, of course, you can then control what output is being displayed at the end after you have internally generated it with the LLM. So for instance, this is especially important if you have a really interactive use case. for your Gen AI application, which is interactive in the sense the user direct interacts with it. So you want to make sure that there are some additional guardrails in place that safeguard you against anything that might be inappropriate. And then, of course, the access module, I think I have said pretty much the idea of that one. It just allows you to access different models we have, but also what we see here, a future feature, quite nice, is that we will also add model fallbacks, or even the possibility that depending on the prompts that you currently handle, on the request you currently handle, we behind the scenes will be able to select the most optimum model for this request. And you can then also optimize, right, the cost performance ratio. So especially at scale, this is really, I think, a nice feature. So with that, we can already also jump to the little code demo I have prepared. So this will also be shared with you in a public GitHub repository. So let's say we want to build a cute little chatbot like this guy here to see how orchestration works. Right, so this is built using the Gen AI Hub SDK, which allows you for direct interaction with the models using our LM access, right? But also we have now added a library for orchestration, what you see here. So you can essentially use what I have just shown you. And I also want to use this opportunity to quickly tell you or explain again this concept of the orchestration config. So we have seen the different modules inside the orchestration sequence, right? So you configure each request with an orchestration config. And this orchestration config has module configuration. So all the different modules we have seen, like grounding, data masking, prompt templating, LLM access, each one of those has its own module config. So we see here template for the prompt templating module and LLM for the LLM module. This is also already a minimum example of an orchestration config, because the other modules we have seen, like data masking and content filtering, these are optional. Grounding, of course, is not yet released externally, so I won't cover this here. But this is the overall idea of the orchestration config. And it's really easy to extend and to modify on the fly, as I will also show you here. So I have also prepared a simple chatbot class where we have variable here for the orchestration service. We track, since orchestration service is stateless, right? We track the history of user assistant interactions in our application on this side. And we have here, we hold the orchestration config. And then we have one method to simply interact with our little chatbots, where we provide the user input, and then we send, simple as that, we just send the request to the orchestration service. We insert the user input here into the prompt templating module, and we also supply the history of the interaction, and then we just consume the result and append it to our history. So you see here already, of course, this is a minimal example, but you get the idea that if you want to add logic, more complexity to your use case, you can just do this by adding a module configuration to orchestration config, and you don't have to write custom code that much. The complexity is moved essentially to the orchestration service, because we have seen across the board, across all the different AI use cases, what are the common patterns. So we are constantly also reviewing this and refining this to make sure that no one has to reinvent the wheel here, and everyone can, as quickly as possible, bring their AI applications to life. So this is then also how it looks like in this example to interact with the chatbot. We also see here, okay, like because we are tracking the history, it's also able to sense what we have asked him before. But I think what's more important or more interesting here is how can we now extend this? So let's say we have now the requirement. We want to make our chatbot also responsible. So as I've shown you in the slides, we have a data masking module for that. And let's also throw in the output filter, the content filter module. We have here the different dimensions you can configure. Similarly, you have the configuration capabilities for data masking, where you can say, okay, I want to anonymize the data across these entities like email, phone, person, organization, and location. And this now suddenly allows us to handle personal information. But before I go there, I just want to quickly highlight, like essentially you just configure a module like this and like this, and you can extend it or bring it to the orchestration config we have defined here at the top, right? As simple as that. You just set the placeholder for data masking, similarly for the output filtering, and that's it. And then the next and in the next iteration, when we chat with the chatbot, these configurations will be used because we supply the orchestration config right with every request, as we have seen before. And now, for instance, I have this CV here from this guy called Patrick Morgan, some bunch of more personal information, right? And typical use case, I want to summarize the CV in 10 sentences. Of course, this wouldn't be so compliant if I just directly send this personal information to GPT-4, let's say. So that's why we have the data masking module. And yeah, as we see here now, this is the response of this request summarize the CV. The chatbot has no notion of the personal information because before sending it to the LLM, essentially the data masking module kicks in since we have it configured and anonymizes all the personal entities we have defined here, like email, phone, and person, and so on. And yeah, this then allows us to suddenly make this happen in such an easy manner. Also, I think this is a nice example which shows that we have all these different services and features internally or also from other providers, like the data privacy service that we use for data masking. That's something we have, colleagues have built this in-house. That's a data privacy service right here. And we have, of course, for content filtering, then we use the capabilities provided by Azure OpenAI. And this is a nice example that you can just quickly try this out, configure it, and you don't have to deal with, okay, how does it work? How do I create this service? How do I onboard to it? How do I use it? All these things are handled for you, are simplified a lot. And I think with that, we can also open it up for questions.
Thank you, Thomas. Really cool. I'm definitely going to try it out, probably after TechEd though, because don't think I have time before that. I actually have a question of my own I want to start with. But also everyone feel free to share your questions in the chat and I'm gonna read them out. So how does the masking actually work? Like, is there like entity recognition or is it like an LLM that reads, well, it can't be an LLM because you can't send it. So how do you actually figure out like what's an email address, what's a name, what's a phone number and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I don't know of the details since it's another service we just consume here. But as far as I know, the data privacy integration or the service, it's not using an LLM. So there's like an
obviously.
entity there's an entity recognition happening.
Cool.
And you can configure it across different long lists actually of different entities. This is just like a small snippet of what's possible. And also next to anonymization, there's also the possibility of pseudonymizing the data, which means
Cool.
that after you have done, so we track internally for the lifetime of the request inside the orchestration service. We have a map of the personal information with the masked person basically in this case. So we can then afterwards map it back so that it looks like, okay, nothing has changed, but internally, and also when you then look at the logs, etc., you will see that the personal information has not reached that.
That was my next question, actually. Can you map it back? Because that's important, right? There's also one question in the chat. This masking service, is it a paid service? And I think, honestly, that probably goes for all the additional things in orchestration.
So in general, when you use orchestration, depending on what you use of orchestration, this is, of course, you have to pay for that. Nothing is free, right? So the data privacy service, we have also, this is also being metered. But everything is basically handled under AI Core. So if you have the AI Core subscription, right, you will see there's also actually a cost calculator for that. So you could also calculate or estimate the costs beforehand. And same goes, of course, for Azure Content Filter. Also create some costs. And if we look at the LLMs, that's something we don't put anything on top. So it's the same cost structure as you would see if you just directly using LLM access directly, if you consume the models there. And actually, one thing that is free is the usage of the prompt templating module, and later also to a certain degree, of course, the usage of the prompt registry and the integration between these two.
And the output filter, that's probably also like a regular expression kind of thing, right? Or how do you?
No, the output filter. This is essentially a classification model.
Cool.
So coming from Azure OpenAI, they have similar to basically every provider has this, right? They use it often as a wrapper around the LLMs when you communicate directly with them. And they also provide this or expose this separately as a service where you have a bit more control over. So you can also configure, for example, the safety thresholds across these dimensions. So here also a little sneak peek what we are going to add, especially interesting for use cases where you want to keep all the data, let's say in Germany or within the EU. So for instance, you don't want in your use case to communicate with Azure OpenAI or any other external provider. We will also offer here a classification service for safety, for input and output filtering that we host ourselves. That will also come.
Awesome. Thank you so much. There are no more questions in the chat, but if questions come up after watching the session, you can always ask the questions, obviously, in the comments here on YouTube, or you jump over to the SAP community where you can also find the session. And there you can also ask your questions, and we will be monitoring those to answer the rest of the questions later. You will be getting the slides and also the code, obviously, so you can try it out yourself. And if you watch out for TechEd, virtual TechEd in 2 weeks, there will also be these like hands-on jumpstart sessions where you get access to systems and you can also try out some other tutorials. And with that, thank you so much, Thomas. I definitely learned a lot. I'm going to watch the session again, though, because I did some admin things in the back and I have to kind of watch it again to really take it all in. Thank you so much for your time. And to everyone else, as I already said, join the Devtoberfest group. Make sure you do all the validation tutorials to collect as many points as possible. And then good luck in the contest, and don't miss out on all the other sessions. There will be one session after this at 10, hopefully without a delay this time. And it's going to be on graph rag. So how to use knowledge graphs to improve your rag performance. So that's also going to be a very interesting session. Yeah, so thank you so much, Thomas. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. Yeah.